Well, a year ago, he visited us in this very same studio, and it's one of the most popular interviews we've ever done with viewers of InfoWars Nightly News and everybody on the radio show and out in YouTube world. With more than 30 million records sold, he is one of the biggest rock stars in history. He founded the Smashing Pumpkins, which I've been a big fan of for years, since high school, really, or I guess college. But the real reason I'm a fan is he is an amazing thinker and gets me to think. As dumb as I am, that's hard to do. Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins here in town to play in Austin, Texas to a sold-out crowd. Good to have you here, my friend. Thank you. Wow, we just talked for like 5 minutes before we went on tonight, and I wrote like 14, 15 different points that you said you wanted to talk about. Where do we start? I mean, Billy, you've got the floor.
Well, last time I was in Austin, you and I went out to dinner and had a conversation. And you were expressing sort of frustration with the, as you're dealing with the information that you deal with on a daily basis, you said, look, at some point the negativity of all of it gets to me. I believe in what I'm doing, but, and you weren't asking for advice, but me being me, I gave you some. And I said I thought that InfoWars would benefit from a spiritual perspective, meaning history has shown, whether it's Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Jesus, that the way to really confront evil in its various forms is to find something within ourselves that doesn't resonate to the fear that's being perpetrated and propagandized, and form a collective. I've heard you say on your show many times, if people would just form together in a common idea, there's no way this can be beaten. Which is why I think you're astute to call it an info war, because the future really is about who controls information and who decides what the information is worth. And what we see from many citizen journalists now, the second and third waves beyond what people like you started, is they're finding clips of things that don't get played on the nightly news, the stuff that you and I never saw growing up. Like even today, this morning, I watched the exchange between Feinstein and Cruz over the gun issue. That's the kind of thing you would never see. And I got to watch the entire exchange. It wasn't edited. It wasn't leaned. I didn't have an anchor on the back end going, oh, can you believe Cruz? Da, da, da. I get to make my own value judgment. So where am I going with this? Anyway, so.
Well, no, I mean, your own instinctive first look. No, that's absolutely what's happening. So now there's a wider range of information out there.
I think we could agree that intelligence is one thing, but street smarts is something that most people have. Most people, if they come from immigrant class like my family did, they had to learn how to survive. And if survival in the modern world is understanding, what the difference is between what we're being told and what we're actually finding when we get our paychecks and things like that, we have to go and seek out that information to deduce it. So I think a spiritual perspective on top of it, and when I say spiritual, I don't necessarily mean a dogmatic spiritualism. I'm talking about earth age-old tenets that mean something. Family means something. You talk all the time about how you've read these eugenicists and stuff talking about breaking up the family and stuff like that. Well, I've seen that in my lifetime. I've seen where television has turned very anti-family. I mean, if you didn't believe in a single conspiracy in the world, if you just watch television like I have for 40 years, you've seen a very negative bias against families. Families are basically made fun of. Men are emasculated on TV constantly. Where does that come from? Is that a cultural thing? Is there somebody predictively programming that? Is there an agenda behind that? Those are all serious questions to ask. So I think it would behoove you to open up into an additional realm in the information that you seek, which is how can we kind of look at some of this information from a more positivistic and spiritually rooted perspective so that we can confront these things and not be overwhelmed by them, but we can kind of look into our communities and unify with like-minded thinkers to kind of take this on in a way that's not basically succumbing to the same low vibration thinking, which is aggression. Like, I love it when you say, I don't believe in this being a violent thing. I don't want people to kill. I don't want guns being used. I don't want a violent revolution.
Well, the system wants that because they think that's an area they control.
Well, you definitely see where the events where people have gone off recently being propagandized, obviously to make other agendas, illuminate other agendas that they obviously want pushed through. And those are scary things for most people. So again, how do we look at these things from a different perspective? So it's not, because because the thing, look, if when you confront negativity in any form, and being in public life, I mean, confronting negativity is just part of the game or part of the job, because invariably somebody's going to disagree with you if you have any perspective. You have to go to a place within that says, well, how important is this really? And I think when we're looking particularly at modern propaganda, I see a real turning point, particularly like people in my community and my family, where they're not so want to buy this propaganda anymore. Recently, we saw with the sequester where the Obama administration ran out there and made it sound like the sky was falling, and the sky didn't fall. And you see really for the first time, maybe in the 5 years or 4+ years of Obama's presidency, where people are really starting to doubt, well, maybe what he's saying isn't, I'm not just going to take it at face value, the people who believe in the things that he said at face value.
And that doesn't mean you endorse the Republicans either. They love to make it like, what, you're with the Republicans? No, I get that both of these systems are contained within the overall same control mechanism. People are going off the reservation. You talked about the paradigm of propaganda and how they use fear, and people see me get angry and they think, you're trying to scare me. No. I'm saying our house is on fire. Let's put the fire out. But they're the ones that I see using the fear, trying to teach people they're powerless. If you really look at what the corrupt forces are doing, it looks like something done actually from a position of weakness.
Well, I would say it like this. Why has information in the modern age become so valuable? I'll play a show in front of, let's say, 5,000 people. Well, if all 5,000 people decide to rush the stage, there's no security that's going to stop them. Well, it's the same thing with governments. They want the populace to be kind of neutered in their thinking because they don't all want them rushing over the gates, a la the French Revolution. Now, we don't want that. Neither you or I have any faith in violence being a means to an end. So why do people want to control this information so vociferously? Why is literally administrations out there, and not just our own, willingly lying? and what's amazing is you see citizen journalists finding out the lies and actually making cogent arguments of where the lies are coming from, and creating historical precedents, or putting their own YouTube videos together of this guy said this and then now he's saying this. And I think that's fascinating because, and I think you were astute intuitively or otherwise to recognize that the info war was really going to be the war, the war for hearts and minds, right? Because essentially if people believe in what's happening, well, then they're less likely to question it. And so this slow degrading of family, of community, of even with the way the new papacy is being viewed, saying, oh, it's got to be like this, and why isn't the new pope like this? Where is all that coming from? That's the way I look at it. It's sort of like somebody who's standing on the sidelines, because as somebody who's been in media for over 20 years, people are scrumming with that football for a reason. That's not an accident.
Why are we being fed a particular agenda worldwide, and why is it so destructive? You were talking about Walter Cronkite, and then there was, in Chicago growing up, 2 papers that said the same thing, and it was almost just basically accepted because there was no other venues. And I said, has it always been that way? And then repeat what you said.
I think it's always been that way. And I think what we're facing now is you have a lot of people doing an end around where they're finding their own information. So what do people do when they feel like they're losing control? Well, they up their control mechanism. If it's the media, they up the sensationalism. They distract you with somebody's boobs or somebody's latest DUI arrest or something like that. I mean, it's fascinating. My assistant back in Chicago, for whatever reason, when you put on the computer, it logs into Yahoo, and they've always got this top 10 list. Whatever the top 10 searches or whatever most traded search. And it's fascinating because you'll have this world crisis, number 2, and then, Kate Upton's nose will be number 1. You would think that the world crisis would invariably be number 1 because it concerns the most people. Why is Kate Upton's nose more important than
because the front page of Yahoo is now crowdsourced, and they've already force-fed the mindless celebrity issue or the new fat cure to the top, and now they can sit back and actually let the crowd source it, and they're now a feedback loop of what the system wanted. In fact, that's what you said eloquently earlier, Billy, was that looking at this, they've always been lying, but now they've doubled down. because I think they're losing control. And the system is just men and women like us. They're not all powerful.
Let's reference your Piers Morgan interview for a second. I think it was fascinating because that was one of those crazy moments where the mainstream, for whatever reason, whether they thought, and I don't want to make it about Piers Morgan because I think it's a much, much bigger issue. People in that position, usually, when they decide to bring somebody that would be considered fringe, a fringe thinker, usually kowtow in that position, or consciously or unconsciously sort of diminish their message, or they're shouted down by somebody, like they were going to have you against, what's his face? Dershowitz. The fact that you didn't kowtow is so rare because most people in that position with, oh, wow, I'm at CNN, I gotta kind of go, I want to be back here again, and I want to, basically they trade their internal integrity for the opportunity. That's basically how the record business works. Like, hey, you want to be here, you want to be on the Grammys, you want to say these things, don't go too far, which is why you rarely see in the music business or in the entertainment business true radicals, because they're attacked. And only the most talented survive the wave of attack that will come. Hence, somebody like Sean Penn can be considered a top actor, a political activist, a social activist, and still be routinely attacked for his views, whether they're right or wrong, because sort of the might is right, like his talent can trump the attack. Most people can't survive the attack. So for everybody who listens to you regularly, they know that, despite your boisterous and vociferous personality, that you're a real person, right? So normally they, try to put their thumb on you, and I'm not saying it was Piers Morgan. I think it's a much bigger collective groupthink. I don't think somebody made a call and said, let's get Alex Jones. It's sort of a groupthink, and then the minions do what they think they're supposed to do.
No, exactly. It's like a spirit, or almost like you watch birds, like a school of fish turning in unison.
I told you that before. I having been in those channels, I don't think people are making direct phone calls. I mean, you put people in positions who will do what a bulldog's supposed to do.
That's right. They pick the personality, knowing what they're going to do.
And if that personality blows the situation up, they can just get another personality and say, well, we didn't have anything to do with him. Remember there was I think it was a CNN journalist who said something, about, I don't know if it was something that was certainly under that context was could be considered racist, but the guy was gone the next day, and they said, oh, we don't, those aren't our views and stuff like that. I mean, the point is this systems are meant to be systems are put in place to keep people in line. Well, the American system, the system that you and I grew up on, where we recited the Pledge of Allegiance every day. We were drinking, I remember they used to hand us little cups, paper cups with pink liquid. Oh, what's this, polio vaccine? I mean, no parental consent. God knows what I was drinking.
Cancer viruses,
well,
on record, SV40.
Well,
no, you're absolutely right.
Way to cheer me up there.
And so really things are actually much better today. The system is so out of control. Well, it is true, but don't worry.
No, but I think
people are waking up is the good news.
But here's the thing. You have so much information now. So let's I mean, this is a really bad analogy, but let's say this is control. This is the system that was there. Okay, well, it's expanding, attracting. People are trying to smush it back down. People that exist outside that system, either the system has to expand and try to include them in the system, which is what people would normally call the sellout, or you have to have enough oxygen on your own to exist outside that system. Ultimately, the system is predicated on the idea that they can either buy you in at some point, like you said at one point, like I think you said Fox News wanted you to do a show, or
a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, those are those moments where they're trying to bring you in the system. They're trying, and again, I don't think it's somebody making a phone call. You've amassed a personal power, and I know you don't like to make it about you, but I think it's a good example in this moment. I've amassed a particular power. We'd actually, if you think about it, we don't actually have that much power.
The ideas have power.
Exactly. And that's the thing that's dangerous, and that's maybe where the spiritual turning point is. As long as you hammer on ideas that are important, as long as I sing songs that have to do with real things, they can replace people like us, but those ideas don't die. History has shown that.
And when a bunch of people pick them up and say, stop telling me I'm a loser, stop telling me resistance is futile. Going back briefly to Piers Morgan, they were doing stuff to be behind the scenes, so I blew up at him. And it was so out of line to get out of the coma and get out of the trance. And I didn't even understand it. You sent me a text like 30 minutes after, I guess you'd seen it. You said, that was the greatest ever. You've broken the trance. And it shows the little guy has the power pulling the curtain back. And I do think, because I'm not hyping things just because I'm in it, I think that was a Wizard of Oz moment.
I agree with you, because we don't know. Look, we're all struggling. I talk to people all the time. We're all struggling what this all really means. And there's tons of stuff that don't fall into the realm of conspiracy. How are we going to reconcile carbon taxes? How are we going to reconcile the cost of Obamacare? Every time they come out with a new estimate, it's double, triple, quadruple what they originally sold it as. I mean, these are very real things.
It's bankrupting everybody, I know.
Right. Okay, so these are real things. So as we're all trying to reconcile where this is all headed, if it is globalism, if there's some sort of massive cabal underfoot, if somebody up at the top is rationalizing, hey, at the end of the day, this will be perfect. Yeah, you'll all be opiated, on your soma, but we won't have wars anymore, and there won't be crime anymore because everyone will be wearing some kind of tracking.
That's what they say, yeah.
Right. So maybe it is some sort of crazy quasi-spiritual justification. I think most people in their heart don't resonate with that idea. We were taught in 1984 in school as this is the idea where we don't want it to go. And people resonate with that.
That's not who we are.
Exactly. So back to the point, and this is why I would encourage you to push for more spiritual subject matter in a non-dogmatic way.
Universal.
Right. People, look, what was interesting to me about that, because I'm not a gun owner, I'm not a total anti-violence on every level if possible, except probably my big mouth. But it was such a rare thing to see a person being real on television. Just the act of being real. I'm a real person, I'm saying a real thing. I'm not controlled by the environment, like you said, in the Wizard of Oz castle. That alone, just that alone is paradigm shattering. And
that's why it was uncomfortable for people.
Yes, but here's the thing. You also have generations now growing up watching YouTube clips of cats playing piano and people doing silly things, but they're also seeing citizen reporters, things like that. So these two worlds are kind of coming together, and they're ultimately going to clash, right? As you point out, the ratings on many of these programs really aren't that big. Sometimes the Drudge will put he always has the ratings. It's shocking, the ratings. But that's what I'm saying is, we're entering this kind of interesting tipping point where who's going to control the message, right? Who's going to control the message? And I think it's important if information is like, the Linus ball, this big thing of dirt, I think it's important to put in value systems that everybody can resonate with, that are apolitical. You oftentimes talk about your family, you talk about nature. I think these are really important things to kind of lend depth to the argument.
I agree. I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you said this at dinner, but this is something I really realized. I get angry at myself when I'm walking on the green belt and I saw the other day the moon and sun up at the same time with like clouds, and I was like, this is hallucination good. I mean, this was gorgeous. And just the birds and the wind and the smell of some flowers, and I'm down there walking with my dogs, and I thought, it's horrible that I'm even giving the system all this power about how evil they are and all the things they're doing. But I've got to get people who are at a lower level to realize that's happening, to get them to look up. The system wants to keep us in an artificial box. And that's what this matrix thing's all about, to not see and feel the universe around us. So I get what you're saying, but how do you translate that? Because yes,
I think you have to turn to people who have let's call it a deeper well of perspective that is timeless. So I would love to see on your program you talk to people who are Native American elders, who have a spiritual architecture and engineering that can talk about how someone 400 years ago would have viewed. I mean, how did the Native American population, if you've ever read Black Elk Speaks, that's an interesting thing. He had visions about how his tribe and his Indian nation were going to be overrun by the white people. And look, I'm no expert in Native American affairs, but what are the chances now that the Native American population of America would ever go back to the way it used to be? Very small, right? Whatever's happened, even though most of it's incredibly unjust and continues to be. So the point of moving forward is a point of integration. What, like, it's that old, it's like in Star Wars, same thing. It's like, what does the enemy teach us about ourselves? I watched the Star Wars recently where Luke's got to go in the weird thing, and he ends up, defeating the ghost Darth Vader
himself.
And it's really himself. And I mean, that's what spiritual languaging teaches us, is that, and back to what I wanted to try to address, is propaganda works on the idea that they're going to touch something in you that you're afraid of. It's fascinating sometimes to read people's comments. I mean, there'll be something that very much concerns them, and it breaks down in these sort of interscene squabbles that don't have anything to do with the thing that was being talked about, because they actually can't deal with the issue that's being presented.
That's why they'll distract off into some conspiracy that has no basis in reality, instead of the trillion-pound elephant hiding right there in the room. Now, I just hope that viewers out there realize that you have inherent power. I think that's what Billy was saying earlier. It's the basic bedrock spiritual things, our conscience, our programming, things we know are true. That's what threatens the system.
I think most people have a hard time understanding it, let's call it at its highest levels. Like if you went if we went out the door or down the street and went to the Burger King and we pulled somebody out from behind the counter, I think they'd probably have a hard time believing that their senator or their president or whatever are inherently evil. Whether you or I could make an argument for better or worse, right? But when they see things in their own communities, when they see things up close that really resonate with them. For example, the woman that you had on, because she was from my area, about where they forced the RF, the smart
meter on her house.
Yeah, that's, I grew up basically 10 miles away from where she lives. That's the kind of stuff that people go, well, wait a second,
And she's videotaping on her own property, the police without warrants putting a meter that dials in and spies on you on record. Mm-hmm. On record. And then she and her neighbors are arrested. Look, my crew can't hand out our magazines downtown. They write us tickets.
That's what I'm saying. That's the kind of thing that people can relate to. So when you start to connect those experiences, if they have a perspective by which they can start to see where they can do something about it, that's the difference. And I think activism is a weird thing. I mean, you can stand up at your local council and, like that woman said, they'd formed this organization, and for 2 years they'd met with city council. And obviously, I think in the story that she told, the city council had accepted some $11 million from the government, and they weren't going back on that decision. So she's basically facing a brick wall, no matter how realistic her arguments were. So there's an inherent negative. She can't get anywhere. She doesn't want this thing in her house. But that video that they made was very, very powerful. That's a real thing.
It was seen millions of times. No.
Right. That's what I'm.
So what is the system going to do? We should talk about this.
Well, ultimately, if we look at history, they're going to try to either shut down alternative media, or they're going to try to control it, or they'll create their own Alex Joneses. I look at it from the intuitive point of view, which is you have to trust something above yourself, whether it's your own familial intelligence or God or whatever you believe in, or if you don't believe in anything.
There is a power to turning loose and believing in it actually does work.
Like, look, I've been on stage, I don't know, 2,500 times, and I faced, people throwing stuff and all. If you go up there waiting for it, in a way it almost kind of invites it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm weak if I go up on stage not anticipating it, but you have to sort of it's sort of like the Jedi Knight thing. You got to be prepared, but you don't walk around in a state of anxiety. If you look at these systems of propaganda, they're predicated on being able to check against your fear and or anxiety, right? Like government. Oh, the government's going to rescue you, don't worry. But then every time you turn around, the government's churning up this fear. And it's weird because when Obama came out in an interview recently, said, "Oh, our debt's sustainable for 10 more years. Don't worry." But then he was just on TV last week going, "We're going to lose firefighters and the world's going to go to hell." And you know what I mean?
I call this an open war against reality, and they have a term called gaslighting, where it's the famous play and then a film in the 40s where the guy's beating his wife, doing horrible things to her, but going, I'm not doing this. And some people, it's like a learned helplessness or Stockholm syndrome. They then because if you just deny something, it has a weird effect on people. It's like they're trying to overturn reality. What would you say to that?
I look at it like this. you've been talking to a minority, right, for 10, 15 years. And the minority has grown. It's an impressive minority, but it's still the minority. You talk to, let's say you talk to 10 million people in a week. There's still another 290 million plus that you're not talking
And
to.
there's 7 million worldwide.
Okay. So what happens when, let's say in the next year, and you know, some of these doomful things happen. What happens when 20, 30 million people wake up? You know, just like any anticipated event. You know, like the whole thing with the National Guard, and, you know, if there's some sort of calamity, God forbid.
Why are they buying bullets, tanks?
What I'm saying is, we're seeing on some level, if you're correct in your analysis, that there's a preparation for government to step in that void. Let's say there's social anarchy or food riots or whatever, all these horrible things that have been predicted. The government's ready to step into that void.
And play the part of hero.
Thank you. If you want to be cynical about it, what we're seeing right now is a turf war, right? A turf war between old Republicans, you know, the Rush Limbaugh, what they call the old white men crowd, you know, as they're struggling for definition in a rapidly changing America. Then you have you know, the coming immigrant classes, which way they're going to go. You know, social liberals who are willing to look the other way while we're doing, you know, these terrible things around the world with drones. I mean, suddenly now those things aren't big issues to social liberals, which is
black sites, torture.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable to me that these are not mainstream issues on the front pages every day when our government is openly acknowledging in many ways.
Warrantless wiretapping.
Just the fact that we're being spied on blows my mind.
They came out in Reuters and said, yeah, the Pentagon, everybody reads your bank account every day. I mean, totally illegal. Nixon was going to go to jail for it, and now it's just like big deal.
Right. So my point is so you see a turf war, right? So here's this dividing line. Okay, let's say free thinkers like you and I are over here, and we're in our little huddled mass, and then this crowd over here who wants to control everything, and let's call it the uninformed in the middle. Well, this turf war is going on. It's like a football game where nobody can really score a touchdown, right? They haven't stamped people like you and me out. And certainly we're not going to stamp them out anytime soon. So it's back and forth. But if something happens where there's this open moment where suddenly 10, 20 million people are suddenly searching for new information because something gets exposed, you know what I mean? I think you have to be able to step into that void with a message that's greater than fear or greater than the counter response to the fear. Because look, and you and I have talked in private besides publicly. And you know, as I said when I said it in the same spot before, even if you're right, it's so hard for your average American to believe it's true. Do you know what I mean? So there's a sort of a transitional moment. It's like you know, in the Matrix when they realize they're in the Matrix. There's a moment like, how is this even possible? Or when they talk about people get out of jail and they just want to go back to jail.
Well, it's like the reality's so bad the guy goes, I want back in the Matrix.
That's my point. That's my point. I know people, and I'm sure many of your listeners have these conversations around dinner tables where, you know, you reel off a list of facts. Did you realize this? And they go, I just don't want to know. I mean, they're raising their hands.
And it's because they have a legitimate point. The power structure seized. What do you do about it anyways? But then if you give in, that just greases the skid. But
my point is those people that sit around those dinner tables that admit to their son or their daughter or their uncle, hey, you got a point. I know things are weird and government, but I'm not going to do it. But there will come a point where it's going to touch them in a way where they're going to have to do something. Let's be cold. It's a game, right? This is a big game, and who gets to win and who gets to control how the pieces move about the board. Okay, there is going to come a point.
They may knock the whole board off.
Well, that may happen, but that would only happen if they're willing to admit that people like you are right, right?
That'll be a double down. That'll totally.
That's like the double down, right? Mm-hmm. Right. But the point is let's say there's something cataclysmic, worthy of knocking all the pieces off the board.
A nuke goes off.
Worthy of shutting down the internet, worthy of silencing any dissident voices, even ones that would be considered mild dissident voices, like has happened in other historical moments of tyranny, right? And every time it was the same justification. We're doing this for the motherland or the fatherland or the excuse will exist. It's what the populace does in that moment that will determine whether it's going to be 50 more years worse, or it's going to have to go through the incredibly difficult kvetching of reality.
And I think that
if we've been in an imperial system all along, which there is evidence to suggest that we've been in an imperial system all along, well, we're going to have to be accountable. Every person's going to have to be accountable on some emotional and spiritual level.
But the price is too big to keep going. What you just said, if they do push it to that, I think all the fake liberals, all the fake conservatives, what's happening is they've denied. And when you deny so long, you get to where you'll deny anything just to say you were right. But then it becomes so, what was the word you used? Absurdist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes so absurdist that it becomes a joke. And I think that's what's happening it was like Robert Gibbs 3 weeks ago on TV. He came out
when he said that they told him there's no such thing as drones. And this is a guy who's supposed to go out there and put his entire credibility on the line. I mean, think of him as a human being.
And he said it's Wizard of Oz. This is an admitted program.
But I'm saying, let's look at it from a slightly spiritual perspective. I mean, Robert Gibbs is a real human being, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure he's got a family.
Smart guy.
Okay. He's obviously made his way up through the ranks. He probably worked, crap jobs. So there he is. You're the PR guy for the president. I mean, if you're a PR guy, that's the job. You're the number one guy in America. You got the best job.
The media.
And then they tell you, and they send out there and just basically lie. I mean, this guy's got to put his entire credibility, his entire career on the line and lie about something.
And then why would he come out now and say it? I'm seeing more and more of that.
Because it's like any other regime. He's thinking, I don't want to go down with this ship. You're seeing now, there was another insider, can't remember what it was about recently, where another guy he wrote a book.
But see, I think that Gibbs moment was like my Piers Morgan moment. More and more people are going, I'm not going to play along anymore.
But the question is, if we're talking about it coldly like a game, right? The question is, does anybody care? If the tree falls in the forest.
So the spiritual issue is people better start caring again.
But that's my point to you is, you can win all day long on the facts. Okay, I once sat here and said, even if everything you say is wrong, I like the argument. Now let me reverse it. Even if everything you say is right, there is a segment of the people in this country particularly, and in this world, that we need to get on board. We're not going to get them on board with fear. We're not going to get them on board with facts. We have to touch some other part of it.
Exactly. What do I do?
But that's what I'm saying. I think you have to diversify your message into a broader thing that's sort of unassailable.
Okay, let's use the Star Wars analogy. The Death Star is orbiting the moon. Star Wars, Episode 4. It's about to shoot the moon, and that's right when they blow it up. It's kind of that moment when both line up. The stars are aligning. It's going to be in that fulcrum
point. And either the dark side's going to win and set you back 1,000 years, or you're gonna go and because just because you stop that Death Star doesn't mean you can stop the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah. So
in that case, it's a lone victory against a still larger force.
Yeah, so we're entering this prime jump point zone, this crossroads. You said we need to have a spiritual talk, and I think this has been a transcendent talk because you've definitely taken me a long way into understanding. You said, Alex, you need to hit that next level, and you're like, I don't know exactly what it is, but we all need to hit that next level to beat this. That Martin Luther King, Gandhi, or what Jesus talked about, that moment. So what in your gut, your spirit right now, what do we do then? I'm talking to the people because you're right. If they don't want this freedom, if they don't want to be free, if they want to be slaves, then we're going down.
That's what I'm saying.
So what do we say to them?
I think you have to find look. Just because I wrote one good song doesn't mean people are going to listen to the next one or the next one or the next one. It's the collective message that I've been able to create that's allowed me to have a wonderful musical life. Because I've been able to create sort of a broader message that has an appeal to lots of different people for lots of different reasons. I think you've been at the tip of the spear for a long time. Personally, on some level, that's worn you down because you are literally shouting against a mountain every day.
Yeah, and half the time I'm so burned out, I'm not even functioning.
But my point to you on a personal level is if you can draw from a deeper well of source, sources that go back thousands of years.
So I need to climb another mountain.
That's what I'm saying. You go read, or bring in somebody who's an expert in people who have a deeper understanding, that bring in the historical and spiritual perspectives, because we're not the first people that have faced this. Yes, we're the first people that have ever faced this in this way, with technology being at the core, the immediacy of communication. But you can't tell me 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, people weren't facing the same paradigm.
Well, they were facing the Roman army that was like, super high tech compared to them. Exactly.
But I'm saying, but tell me that it was any different. Tell me it was
the natives facing people with guns. Yeah.
Right. I'm saying, how were those things overcome?
You said you're reading a book right now about the African slave trade. I've read those too. It's amazing. I mean,
yeah. It's I can't think of the man's name was Barth. He traveled in Islamist Africa in the 1850s. He was a German guy, but somehow he got a British commission, and obviously the British were sending him down there to see how reasonable would be to go and
intel
plunder. Exactly.
Scoping.
But he was a scientist, and he rationalized going. But he witnessed what was an awful slave trade, and he said that in his notes, he said that the African slave trade on other African tribes was shocking him. He thought it was simply sort of an imperialistic type of thing, and they realized that the slave trade was going on. Why were Africans enslaving other tribes? Because it was, your big tank against my big tank. It's just a different paradigm. My point is it's
like local cops. This system's destroying their kids' future, but they'll still be mercenaries and do it.
But look, I would take anybody at any system. I once went out with a woman who grew up in the Soviet system, emigrated in the 80s, lived there until she was 11 years old. She said her parents would tell her, don't talk too loud about the government because the neighbors will report us. I mean, imagine growing up in a society like that. Well, you know what? Now we actually have to think about that.
No, they have people report us all the time. We have FBI showing up all the time. And I mean, I can't hand magazines out.
Right, okay, but look.
But people were in denial. When I first Saturday night did a video about this from Galveston before I drove back, or Friday night, drove back Saturday, people were saying I was a liar. Now we have the photos and video out. They're on YouTube saying, what's the deal? I mean, I can't hand magazines out on a street corner in America.
Okay, but stop. Think about that for a second. Let's look at it from a different perspective. The guy that's standing there, right? I'm a listener. I know this is stupid, but this guy up here told me I better do it. I meet TSA agents who are frisking me down, who are embarrassed to be frisking me down because they know my music and they know me, and they know I'm not
a terrorist.
Right, and they're embarrassed. Why are good-hearted Americans willing to follow orders? Do you know what I mean? Why in other tyrannical regimes were those people willing to follow orders? I think you have to address those questions, and I don't think you can address them on the veracity of the fact, which is it's dumb. Okay, most people, if you sat them down at a table and explained the story, they'd say that's dumb. Okay, but this kind of dumb stuff's going on every day. Kids being expelled. Some kid said to another kid, 5 years old, something about shooting him. I mean, I grew up playing cowboys and Indians. It doesn't mean
if a donut looks like a gun, they're kicked out. What about the bubble gun girl?
Right, but I'm saying is I think you have to start getting into the mind of and I hear you say it, and I think it's a powerful message when you say, hey, you out there who think you're going to get away with this and they're not going to come looking for you at some point. Don't be fooled, right? But I think you have to get into the heart and mind of what their motivation is. In wrestling, they
know that, but they're in the minute, they're scared.
What they say in wrestling, right? The bad guy has to believe in what he's doing. So even the bad guy believes in what he's doing. He's been propagandized. I'm beating this kid down for America, or whatever they're thinking. You understand?
I'm dropping this drone on a whole wedding party to get one guy. Collateral.
Because I'm killing a terrorist. You have to get into that person's mind of why.
Did you know they give higher medals to the drone operators than Purple Hearts?
That's been suspended now, I've heard.
Okay, but I mean, they're overdoing it. Like, you're such a hero.
As someone who admires your courage, I would like you to see you broaden the message and bring in people who can speak to this kind of, whether it's a historian, I mean, maybe once a week, it could be a special feature, a historian, bring in people from the Catholic Church, bring in Buddhists, bring in Native American elders. Ask, how do you guys view this, or girls? How do you process this reality?
So you're saying reach out to all the groups to get them thinking about it.
Not all that, but I
mean, by talking to people, it gets them thinking as well.
Look, let's be let's make a small rhetorical example. Maybe your message and maybe the message of other enlightened thinkers really only reaches people who have enough educational background or cognitive background to recognize that it's a good argument, right? A lot of people are raised on junk food and Gilligan's Island and probably don't have the, I'm not saying they're stupid, but they don't have the intellectual capacity because they've never been in that situation to have to think like that. A lot of lower classes, which I come from in my family background, they're predicated on survival. Right? What was some of the way the election was, this last election was waged? It's survival. Hey, if I vote for this guy, I got a better chance of surviving than if I vote for this.
And then he raises payroll taxes on poor people.
It's too late now, right? But I'm saying is, my point is you got to explain to somebody who doesn't necessarily think like you or like that why it's.
So you're saying by getting all the other groups on and getting them to talk about it, that'll reach.
I think you diversify the import of the message so that it resonates at a higher level, right? Most people believe in what America means, even though there's plenty of evidence to suggest we've killed and maimed plenty, right? There are people out there, veterans, who really struggle with why they went here. You know, I know one kid who struggles with why he went over to Iraq.
And the power structure knows that. They get them when they're 18, knowing later they're going to wake up, but by then they're now listed as the terrorist. What do you think about them saying veterans are the #1 terror threat?
I find that probably one of all the things you talk about, I find that to be one of the most disturbing.
It's bizarre.
Well,
I mean, it's over the top.
It's interesting from this perspective. Look, you know, you watch the basketball game. And there's the commercial for the, whatever, the Air Force. And it's like a video game, drones. And, it looks like, I literally think it's a video game commercial until I realize it's for the Air Force or something.
They're blurring it.
Right. But they're bringing these people in, believing a set of ideals, which is consistent with, American greatness or something.
And freedom.
Right. Okay. So let's say you believe it, and nothing I say or you say would change their mind. America's the best, and I did this for a reason. I serve my country. Well, now we have a lot of evidence to suggest that they're not being supported when they come home. The Veterans Administrations, all this kind of stuff, right? And even like them not allowing them to show the coffins when they come back. All that kind of stuff, right? Why are they flipping that narrative? Because that's a pretty big flip. From you're a hero, applaud the troops, to you can't even hold now we don't trust you with a gun.
Wow.
Or I saw that clip where the city councilman objected because there was a guy who was a veteran, had a right to carry. And did you see that clip?
Yes.
And he got up and left because he said, I don't want to be in here. And the guy was not breaking the law. He's a veteran. You know what I mean?
They want to send him to foreign countries to kill people, but now when they have that right to defend themselves and have a Second Amendment here, they don't even want to be around it. It's like,
but again,
the technocrats want to send him to kill, but now they're scared of it.
But again, I'm just using this as a point to illustrate what I'm talking about. What's the higher perspective on that? Why do we sell somebody so hard as a hero, and then what propaganda do we need to use to believe that they're dangerous?
It's like spiking a cannon after a war. They're decommissioning a weapon.
Right, but why do they need to do it that way? That's why I'm saying I watched that trend.
Yeah, why are they? Because it's waking people up. I think the establishment has been very smart and professional in the past, but I think they've been smoking their own dope. I mean, more and more, because I always heard the argument that the elite are crazy, and I'm like, oh no, they've got it all together. Why do you think they're doing it?
That's a really good question. I think that's a very real question. I think the speed of information, even to the let's say you're in American intelligence and you're actually sitting at the top of the data heap and you can see where it's going, and you're talking to the guy who's predicting what it's going to be like in 20 or 30 years. I think even if you're that guy or that woman, you're sitting on top of that data heap. I think the speed at which this is moving is probably almost beyond human conception.
I agree, and now there's so many angles. They can listen to all our phone calls, but they don't have time to listen.
If you're talking to a veteran who feels like, hey, I serve my country, I don't break the law, I don't smoke weed, I don't do anything. I go down to a local bar, have a couple on Saturday, You know, I got kids, I got a good job. Why are you demonizing me? I think you have to appeal to them beyond just the fact. That's what I'm trying to say.
Like you don't deserve that.
Look, you could put 10 people in this room and you could tell them the most honest thing in the world, and 3 of them wouldn't believe you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but we need those people. We need everybody to want to turn this country around, right? Because we don't want, look, we can sit here and talk all day about, you know, Rome and this and, you know, the Third Reich, that and whatever, but if this country ends up in some kind of scrap heap, okay, if it even approaches the scrap heap,
the whole world's going to be in trouble.
The whole world's in trouble,
It is in trouble.
and I don't necessarily want to go through that.
I want to avert this.
I know you do, but that's what I'm trying to say to you is so when you're talking and you're making that argument and you believe you're right and you know you're right, it doesn't mean that everyone's going to hear you. You have to modulate the message in a way that people can understand and appreciate it on their own level. And to me, higher level information, you know, like, look, I found this in my own musical life. If I talk about music from a conceptual point of view, which is what makes music popular, why do people want to buy it, or whatever. If I talk about myself, people get trapped into thinking, oh, he's trying to sell me something, right? Yeah. And I think, I don't need to sell another record, I don't care, right? If I name other bands, they think, oh, you're bitter, you're just jealous of their success. But if you talk to them on a conceptual level, they'll actually hear what you're saying because it's not personalized. So at some point you have to go into the conceptual level to understand. And so I mean, it might be important to bring on somebody who's an expert in the decline of the Roman Empire.
Because they'll see the parallels without me pointing them out.
That's my point. And then you don't have to.
You flip it, something just too separated from even our time, and now they're not so emotional.
Because ultimately, anybody who's skilled in propaganda can break my message apart, your message apart, anybody's message.
Misrepresented.
But there are people who are skilled at that. They talk about it. They talk openly on broadcast and cable news about propaganda. It's not even hidden. They talk about a
desperate tactic now to just normalize. Like I want to think Gibbs was trying to do the right thing, but he made a joke out of it. It's more of, okay, I lie, but it's because I'm the master.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I think
it's a little deeper than that.
No, I agree. But no, I agree. I was saying I hope he was being real, and not.
But my point is it doesn't matter
because now they're having to admit
it. If somebody with as much juice as Robert Gibbs is willing to come out and talk openly about that, that's a pretty powerful thing. I don't care what his motivation. Let's say his motivations were totally self-serving. It doesn't matter because somebody who comes out from behind the curtain and says something, no matter what their motivation, that means what's going on behind the curtain is not as powerful. I thought it was interesting, just to go back to the Alex Jones Pierce Morgan interview for a second. I thought it was interesting the way that you were attacked from both sides, right? Yeah. Because some people say, oh, you know, see, you know, what Dershowitz, there's your advertisement for why we need gun control. Then some of the gun rights groups, and I read like the next day before the analysis sort of fell into where it was going to fall, which were saying, oh, that's what we don't want. Like, you know, he shouldn't have been like that. What's interesting to me is you were splitting a hair on the paradigm that rarely gets split. People are trying to fringe them out. And, you know, all their, the NRA.
And that's a way to intimidate them.
That's my point.
It's all part of pecking. Well, you've experienced this. I've experienced this.
But think about it for 1 second. I don't know how long the NRA has been around, right?
Since 1867.
Okay. They've got grassroots connections. They've got political connections. They've got contributors. They're still hemmed in on some level. You know what I mean? So when people come from outside those systems, it's dangerous because you're not gonna shake the hand behind the scenes and say, yeah, you know, my game versus your game. So I think it's important that you bring in historical and spiritual analysis to say how were these systems defeated and what were the principles that actually defeated them? What actually defeated these systems?
Because you're right, history repeats itself. I'm trying to defeat them going, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad. but people don't even know what do you replace it with. So I think we need to look at what has defeated. There it is, a solution. No history, so you don't repeat it. What has defeated this in the past? That will be the key to the solution now. I mean, I also, like you said, reach out to the system and say, do you really want this for your kids? And I think that's effective as well.
Yeah.
In closing, just amazing interview. The website, we've had that on screen throughout. You never went away, but there's been a big resurgence. Why do you think that's happening?
I think just to make it consistent with the talk we've had, I think I had to when I had nothing, I was willing to play along with the system that was presented. I was willing to give my rights away, and then once I was inside the machine, I thought, wow, this is kind of really weird. Then you start trying to manipulate the machine so it works better for you. Meanwhile, you're losing some part of your, we've all seen that movie. Artist loses their integrity or whatever in the process, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, consciously or unconsciously, I blew up part of my musical career because I was so uncomfortable with the sort of the falsehoods and the compromises of the music business. I mean, I meet people all the time who say, oh, I love this guy. And I think, oh, man, if you knew what that person was really like, or whose skull that person had stepped on to get in that place, So you learn that there's a public game and a private game and turf wars and stuff like that. And for years I thought about retiring because I thought I just can't live in this slimy, dirty business. And then I ultimately had to figure out, well, I want to do this. How do I do this right? Well, I started to have to do my own business, my own systems. I gave some of the music away for free. And then I amassed some other power that I didn't have before, or I recollected something within myself to where maybe I have something that I could have only had by going through that. And that's where I would sort of close.
So you came out of Babylon or out of Egypt like Moses, went to the wilderness, and then came back.
Yes. I think one of the most powerful moments in the story of Jesus' life is when he loses his temper at the money changers.
You didn't say that last time.
Okay, so. He knocks over all the tables. I think that's an incredible story because it says even a spiritually rooted human being can reach a point of frustration, right? So what that tells me is there is a moment to get angry, and just like is it Ecclesiastes? It's the bird song, there's
a time to live, a time to die.
Right. There's a time for everything, and I think where we're at now is there's a time where we have to go into something that that is unique to the unique to the American experience. For people who grew up in our relative generation, who were told America's number one and this, and we're the shining beacon on the hill, and all these things. Now we're having access to information where we realize not only is that maybe not true, but maybe it never was true. So there's a part of us as Americans that resonates with the idea that America does have a unique and special quality, even if it's an ideal. So what can we learn through this experience that we can restore that ideal so we can get back on the page where people have jobs and they're proud of themselves, and
exactly,
right? Because there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with meeting somebody who works hard because they want to get something out of life to provide for their family, good values. There's nothing.
I mean, that's true. That's freedom. I mean, Martin Luther King said, colorblind society, don't judge by their color, judge by the character of their deeds.
As we spoke at dinner, I think, look, I came into contact with you probably 6-7 years ago. And there's even a song that I have on my Zeitgeist album, which is called United States. And we're actually performing the song at the moment. And the lyrics, and I realized the lyrics came from a lot of the things that I learned from sourcing out things that you were talking about. As I said before, I didn't just take your word for it.
Rob Jacobson came to me when that came out. He said it was his favorite record, and we listened to it in the office. We were making Endgame then. It had just come out. And he goes, this guy's listening to you. You got to contact him. This guy's listening to you.
Well, that's true.
That's funny.
So, okay, so over the course of 6 to 7 years, I've had to go through different versions of, what does this really mean for my country? What does this mean for me as an individual? What does this mean for me as an artist? What does this mean for my brother who's special needs? I mean, what do all these things mean? And all I can say and share with humility is that you've got to go to a place within yourself that believes in something higher, whether it's American idealism or, as Rush Limbaugh says, American exceptionalism. I mean, you have to believe in something to guide you out of this wilderness.
You have no rudder.
because my point is I don't care what your political affiliation is. You'd be hard-pressed to find just about anybody living in America right now that's comfortable with the way things are going.
So you've got to realize you're the solution, and then think about, how do I change? And then together we can change the larger.
But that's my point is I think, like, you can cite, and you cite facts and figures and this study, and I read this, Club of Rome report from blah, 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 blah. You can do that all day till you're blue in the face. But sometimes some of the most effective moments on your programming is when you talk about being a father or a citizen or a nature. So what is it about that can resonate beyond?
It's the shared human experience.
Thank you.
Billy Corgan, we're going to have you back as soon as you come back through Austin. And it is really great to hang out with you and to have you challenge me. And I hope I challenge you. You're awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you for the time. Well, my friends, that's one for the record books. I can probably tell you unequivocally that may be the most powerful interview I've ever done in 17 years on air, and I didn't know that was going to happen, and it's good to get butterflies because I don't ever get those anymore, even when I'm talking to 5,000 people on a stage. So hope you analyze that interview, look over it. Think about it, because my gut, my spirit tells me that was important. And I think it's important. We all have to really think about where we are in the universe right now and really work together to change this planet, because we are hurtling in the wrong direction. And everyone in their gut knows that as a civilization, as a species, we are in grave danger, but that the solutions to turn this ship around are always there. Well, that's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. God bless you all.